But so you build up a whole world, 15 years you build out this world of social functioning capacity. Then it caves in, something's missing. You finished, your kids are grown up, now you have to face yourself. Or so many things come in, you're in a job, you've been there 20 years to take care of the kids, but you're not going to get any promotions, you're static there, other people getting raises past you. It's not tolerable, something's missing. But I need to, when I can't let it go, but I need time for myself. You're going to have to have the personal growth. So you're going to go through this identity crisis of disassociation, not fitting, of failure, of inadequacy, and it's going to show on people around you. And eventually they'll pull away and you're going to be pulling into yourself and you're going into from the most social, functional time, the most selfish time in your life again. And you have to go back to school, add new things, learn how to live on another cycle. So if you're just living on the same level of consciousness, the cycle, you can, some people will anchor in and repeat the same depression, the same things across each 30-year cycle. But it's really supposed to be a spiral. You make the effort. In the second spiral, you've been over it before, so you work it on a different level. You know where you're going. You begin to understand how to work this better and better. So this is the positive thing. But if you're growing up with parents that are junkies or parents that are alcoholics or violent, abusive parents, you've got a negative Saturn. You're going to have these negative Saturn effects on this. And you're going to have to work extra hard to try and get back on track to some degree on these phases, to try and go, just get it going a little bit better in this way. So the growth of influence, of status, of influencing other, impressing each other. Oh, I'm this person, I'm this, look who I know, I'm an astrologer. Well, for me, I became the astrologer. I extended my influence. I joined community groups and functions, became part of it, until I realized, I don't know, everybody's in their own world. I didn't belong there. I had to do more research and do more studying. So it changed, like this has changed. I spent almost 50, about 50 years being an astrologer, almost done 2 cycles of this, being the astrologer and having to go through the ups and downs, the inside and the outside of it. So I guess you could, so I guess the old puzzle of which side of a chicken has the most feathers is really appropriate here. So which side of a chicken has the most feathers? The outside, of course. The above the horizon side, of course. And the inside is not where the feathers are. So sometimes we're working inside, sometimes we're working outside. Sometimes we're grooming our feathers, sometimes we're pulling in. And sometimes we just get killed and fried or baked. And sometimes we grow and we have free range or whatever. But like this applies to any cycle of time, 30-year cycles. Eagles, they can live 60 years, but at 30, they have to go through this death-defying thing, and almost they would die if they didn't do it, but they have to, their nails fall off and they have to rip off their beak and pull all the nails and the beaks off and grow new ones at that age to start their next cycle. So eagles, even animals, go through these cycles too. It's the natural cycle of growing. So you're going to run across people with the identity crises. That's when a lot of people, as Saturn's coming down through this, in the 10th, 11th house, they're too busy to think it's going to ever end for them. And they have to say, well, at some point, if someone comes to you then, you're going to be saying, well, you're coming up to time when you're not going to be able to keep the busy. You're going to burn out. You can't keep going like this. Like you can be going, but then you can have bad habits. Habits from the fourth, fifth house, drinking, whatever, to get along better with other people, whatever. But then you've done it so long, it starts to affect your functional capacity and you're getting sick. So you can burn out by health, you can burn out by status. You're losing your motivation. By the time Saturn hits your ascendant, you have the identity crisis. There's no more motivation. Why bother? So the world caves in then. And then once it caves in, you just got to start growing and keeping busy, just because you don't waste any more time. You got to put the effort on yourself, even though you're not fitting in, even though you lost all that, even though that was there and you used to be such a big person. Now it's time you have to start working on yourself. So the transition, knowing you're going from the growth and influence to personal growth, even if you know it 4 or 5 years early, that's useful to know to deal with the cycle. Then once you're in the personal growth, well, you only have to, in 2 years, I would take a 2-year course and I want to go and do this, but 2 years, no, you still got to grow more. You may as well put the whole degree together, go for it. You're encouraging the personal growth through this whole phase till they get motivated. Once they get motivated, then things turn. Then you have to work with it. But the tendency is not just take the job right away. You want to start working on what you're interested in, start building up and trying to get jobs doing what you know what you do. doing what you can, and you're working to use what information you have. Then you start to get recognition for it. So if someone wrote a book or was studying and finally wrote a book or made a movie with Saturn below the horizon, learned how to do it, then they're editing it and fixing it up and making other movies or whatever with Saturn and the growth and capacity. By the time they're not getting recognized that much for it. When they said to start getting recognized, then they have to do the social role to go along with it. And that builds up their status. Not everybody's in sync with their Saturn. It's happening. It's healthy to be in sync with it. It's responsible advice to help someone get in sync with their Saturn cycle. It's irresponsible if you don't encourage this. In fact, if you don't see every other transit, whether it's a Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, whether something disrupting you, disturbing your life, everything falls apart, you still have to get back to this cycle to begin with, to make sense of the things. So incredibly useful. This is the backbone of astrology, of timings. So, okay, where are we? Okay, I could talk on any of these and keep going. 80% of my charts, 80% of the advice, maybe more of the advice I give to people is Saturn to Saturn, Saturn to the Sun, and Saturn to the angles. So if you have your Saturn down low in your chart, say Saturn's in your second house like it is for me, by the time Saturn's growing and functioning, it's opposing my Sun. I don't do that side well. And everything falls apart on me at that time. I get really depressed and hemmed in, I'm restricted, I'm limited. And those were very disassociative times for me when I should have been functioning. So, but after finishing that phase, I built up to the midheaven very quickly thereafter. I had a certain status after that. Some people, if they have their, say their son's over in the 6th house and they get their Saturn opposition in the 12th house. Well, things can fall apart. It's going to be a long time before they build back to the same thing. They're not going to go on from it. So now that you have the phases, you can also see where along the phase, where does the Saturn conjunct the Sun or Saturn opposed the Sun come in? Wow, then it starts telling you which areas you're really working with and which areas you're being hemmed in or delayed in, or where you have to bide your time in. And you see the areas the times when you have to struggle. But this simple little thing, the 4 phases, the 4 crisis times. You're either in a crisis time, you're going into one, you're coming out of one, you're in this phase of growth. And if someone doesn't see that phase of growth, it's coming from here, it's going from there. So a lot of times someone sits there in their personal growth says, well, you were at your peak of status 10 years ago. And so I must have started, but you knew where you were, you got out of the house, you saw where you were, you knew where you were in the world, for better or worse. Now you don't know where you are in the world, you're struggling with yourself and you're seeing it. You fell off that mountain and you got it. Your next peak in power is going to come 20 years from now. Oh, geez, that long. Then I say, yeah, but you got time to go up. And then, if someone's in their 20s, you say, well, in your 50s, 60s, that's a nice time to peak. Like to have things together rather than falling apart. So the age you are is going to determine a lot of the factors on how you're going to grow. So by watching these 3 things, Saturn to Saturn, Saturn to itself, conjunctions, the oppositions, and these phases, and seeing how people apply these 3 levels and how they come together, you get a really incredible insight about human nature, about transits, and how they work. And these are things you can see, you can talk to someone about. You may not know the exact solution of the identity crisis, but you can go into it. Then you explain, well, then you go through the whole cycle. You go back. Often the identity crisis is tied up to the motivation that happened 21 years before I had the kids, or I was motivated to do this, and this is all I got out of it. I got here and it ended, now what? Why what? And then you have to point out the cycle and that goes around and you have to build it up again. So it's common sense, it's simple, but it's just a diamond shining, it's like a star shining in the world. It just lights up how you work with transits. It's the backbone against which every other transit has to follow against this graph. When you see it for yourself and all the different pieces fit together, we're going to go through, we're going to look at all the other planetary transits and we're going to see them. They each have their own energies. This is the one that sets the standard for you. If you're being responsible, you're living on your Saturn graph. If you're not being responsible, you're still living on your Saturn graph in a negative way. If you're living in a positive way, the positive growth will happen, the understanding will click in better, you'll be able to direct your energies better from good outlook, Jupiter, good actions, Mars, and you'll accomplish things. It'll work with it. If Mars and Jupiter are fighting it and they don't have a good attitude, you're not going to grow very. You'll grow, but you can get negative experiences in growing. One person, their status could be they get a big raise. Another person, they get arrested because they try to steal something. They got the status as a crook. Someone else might just become a father. Oh my goodness, I got these other commitments. I'm going to have to work more. Someone else may be working and they're at a peak of status and they may be 65 at this peak of status. They think, should I retire? And you look at them and say, no, you don't retire. You got still 5 or 6 years of strong influence. You still hold on to your work and keep going, and you're going to be retiring later. Take any situation and throw it on the graph. See what the influence means. See how it works. And you'll see it for yourself and watch it for the 5 or 6 people around you that you got the charts that you're working with, and then it'll expand. But this is responsible advice. This is the way we live our lives and work with it. If you're just doing one chart and comparing all the transits and all the planets in one chart to all the transits from a transit chart to a natal chart, and you're just saying whatever comes up, you don't get this phase. You don't see the phases of development. You don't see how one thing's connected to another. It's just a random grouping of things, and you can get really dangerously lost in that area. You can stay on track with the Saturn cycle. It'll hold everything else in perspective. Okay, I guess I better get to my boring story and talk about it. Normally in a class, I'd be asking what your story is, what happened to you when this happened, what happened, and we'd be talking, and the class would go for a couple of more hours. But everyone has, so I have Saturn, Pluto in the 12th house. The harsh father, always afraid of him, difficulty, problems, whatever. But we were always afraid of him. Saturn hit my ascendant. My brother was born. My grandmother and grandfather died. My uncle died. My mother's father and mother and her brother, they all died within this period. And it really was, I had all the territory to me. I was the only one for the first couple of years. I don't even remember this time period. And yet brother was born, and I had the brother, but it was a new identity and a new way of living different times and more responsibilities, not getting the same attention from that point on. And shortly thereafter, my parents had broken up. We were very poor. They broke up. They were apart for a year or two. They got back together again, got a place. And so by the time, so they were back together again, and we were living on a riverfront in a house, rented house. But by the time Saturn hit the IC, my next brother was born. In between this, my mother lost a 6-month-old boy. She almost drowned and miscarried. But in between this, there would have been 3, but there was just the 2 of us. One was born in my ascendant, one was born in my IC. Huh. So I see that's, well, how's that affect my motivation? Well, my little brother Neil, when he was born, he was very sickly. He was sick for the first 3 or 6 months of his life, and we had to move from where we lived. And we had a poor house on a riverfront. We rented it. It was half of a house, and but even the floors had a 12-inch drop from one area to the other. It was great for toys, but it was poor. But we had fun. It was right on the riverfront. We played on the river. We had nature. We were out in the river, out fishing, out swimming. We had fields around us. We had a lot, in spite of all the difficulty, I had a lot of nature around me that I loved, climbing trees, fruit trees all around. So there was, and the fishing and like, it was really wonderful. And my brother was born, he was sickly. He was born in September, and that whole winter he was sick, and we had to move out of that place away from the river. So the moving away from the river, it's interesting, I had the IC in Scorpio. So having to move away from this, out of the river, my brother was born, he was sick, almost died, lived, but we had to move to an apartment away from the river. That was a huge change in my life because I didn't have the river to go play with anymore. I didn't really see a different attitude came in. And in terms of knowing what I didn't want, I was too young to really assess it that way. I'm only 10. At the end of this, I'm 10. And